I want you to be truth-driven and not agenda-driven. So this cartoon gets it across pretty well. Here's the conclusion. What fact can I find to support it? That's a bad way to go. Scientific method, here's the facts. What conclusions can we draw from the facts? This also influences on something called Bayes' theorem, which I'll spend just a moment talking about. So Bayes' theorem is finding statistical probabilities that include the so-called priors, the prior knowledges that go in. And it's a little surprising that Bayes' theorem wasn't as appreciated and as used as often as it should have been until relatively recently, because Bayes' theorem has been around for, 200 years, 300 years, 250 years. But here's an intriguing application of Bayes' theorem. So suppose you have, who knows, maybe this will be relevant for one or two of you out there. Suppose you have a drug test, and the drug test gives 99% valid positive results for actual drug users. Okay? If you're a drug user and you take this test, the test 99% of the time comes back and says, yep, he's a drug user. And further, it has a 99% valid negative result for non-drug users. In other words, if you're a non-drug user and you take this test, 99% of the time it comes back and it says, you're not a drug user. I mean, you got to admit, that's a darn good test. I mean, think about the kinds of probabilities we're having to deal with thinking about COVID-19 lately, right? I mean, 99% on both sides, that is darn good. Okay, now let's further suppose that only 0.5% of people, in fact, are drug users. Let's just suppose that. Now assume a randomly selected person is tested. Suppose, you're just driving by yourself and, I don't know, officer doesn't like your car, just something about, you and your car that just tells him, you know what, I'm going to check this out. And he applies the drug test. Okay, and suppose he applies the drug test and the test comes back positive. And you're starting to think, oh my God, I'm in so much trouble. What are the odds that this person, maybe you, really is in fact a drug user? That's my question to you. I'll tell you what the odds are. Surprisingly small. 33%. You say, what, Rick? You're telling me it's 99% good on both sides. And you're saying yet when you apply the test to a random person, it's only accurate 33% of the time? Well, if he tests positive, yeah, because the prior is that he's a random person, and therefore his odds of being a drug user starts out at 0.5%. Now it bumps up quite a bit to 33%. But still, 33%, that's not enough to convict somebody. I mean, really? So, who knows, maybe that'll be useful for you someday. Here's more nerd humor for you. This neutrino detector measures whether the sun has gone supernova. Okay, it's a detector of neutrinos. Let's try it. Detector, has the sun gone nova? So what it does is it rolls 2 dice, and if both come up 6, so it rolls a perfect 12, it lies to us. Otherwise, it tells the truth. Okay, so it only lies if the dice come up double 6s. So what are the odds of rolling a double 6? Well, the odds are only 1 out of 36, right? 1/6 times 1/6, or 1/36 of the time is it going to roll up. So most of the time, it's going to tell the truth. So you roll the dice, roll, and it says, yes, the sun has gone supernova, as you could probably guess that it would if the odds are 35 out of 36 that that's what it would answer. The probability of this result happening by chance is only 1/36, 0.027. Since 0.027 is less than 0.05, which is the usual standard, 2 sigma, standard deviation, 2 standard deviations is, for at least some areas of science, is enough to conclude that, yeah, this is real and it's not just a fluke. So I conclude that the sun has exploded. Now, so far, nothing particularly funny here. Here's what's funny. I bet you $50 it hasn't. Now, why is that funny? Okay, the only way he loses the bet is if the sun did go supernova, which they're going to find out about momentarily, certainly as soon as the sun comes up. And then who cares who wins the bet? Okay, everybody gets blown to smithereens. Anyway, it's always sad when you have to explain a joke. I hope everybody laughed. If you didn't laugh, shame on you. Okay, so everybody's now saying lol, LMAO. Okay, good. I have another essay called On Teaching, which says a little bit more. I'm not going to go through On Teaching here. I'm just going to finish up with one last little thing. And this is something that I often test because it is so important. I often put this on quizzes. What is biased teaching? Now, because you're all distant there somewhere, I'm not really going to wait for somebody to answer. But often when I'm in the classroom, there'll be somebody who'll say, well, biased teaching is when you go in and you already have an idea of what's right. And that's what you teach. Is that biased teaching? No, not necessarily. And we could go on, but I'm just going to tell you what's biased teaching. Unbiased teaching is teaching that is accurately aligned with the weight of evidence. Biased teaching is teaching anything else, which fails to present the actual weight of evidence, in other words, whether by intent or by failure to prepare. So it might be innocent, or it might actually be with an agenda involved. You might not present the evidence against your idea because you know if you did, that your idea would be bad. So I've seen this happen in climate science, in education. I mean, it's pretty disgraceful. Unbiased does not mean you give equal credibility to all ideas or all proponents of ideas in a given area. That's not unbiased. Biased teaching is when you fail to present the proper weight of evidence. Your students should walk out of the classroom with a proper appreciation for what's most likely to be true and a rough number on how probable it is to be true. Okay, so if we were to give a weight of evidence that lunar eclipses are caused by the moon going into the Earth's shadow, well, we'd give that a weight of evidence of, about as close to 100% as I can imagine. If we're going to give a weight of evidence to the conclusion that the dark matter particles are supersymmetry particles, well, we got to give that a much lower odds, much lower. We don't really know what the dark matter is. But it might be supersymmetry particles. So the reason it's important is because you have to be on the lookout for false balance. Don't be fooled by the politically motivated false balance that you often see on network media. So they interview a scientist on a new discovery in a field that's politically charged. And then they feel obligated, the media, feel obligated or pressured by advertisers to give equal time to a shill from the special interest group posing as an expert, but in fact is spreading falsehoods, now aided by the media. So I have seen this time and again. I don't see it quite as much as I used to, thank goodness. But it's been so common seeing this in climate science, especially back when I first started in this field about 10 years ago. False balance. Be careful of false balance. All right, Martian canals, what are they? Well, you know what? The eye is trying to make sense out of some dots that it thought it saw. So very, very careful, very diligent, but looking through real telescopes, through a real atmosphere that really vibrates and moves back and forth because of convection. So there's drawings of Mars done 150 years ago. And here's the same place on Mars. So the big features he got right. Syrtis Major, polar cap, Hellas, this sort of Indonesia-looking feature here, this India feature here, this big crater, the Indian Ocean. It all looks good. Of course, this is not the Earth. This is Mars. Just has a little bit of relationship to Earth. Oh my God, what happened to Australia? There's no Australia here. Okay, but you know what? It's not the Earth. I can tell I'm getting a little punchy here. I need to draw this to a close quickly. Anyway, the canals are not here. Now, the canals were drawn in because he thought he saw little dots that were his brain then decided to connect into canals. And the word for canals in Italian, canali, sounds a lot like canals, but it's really channels. He wasn't really saying canals. He was saying channels, meaning they could be just riverbeds, ancient riverbeds. He wasn't putting an intelligence onto their design and construction. But because canali sounds so much like canal in English, it got turned into canal right away. And that was when the whole Martian thing took off, and that was in the 1880s, and it stayed with us for 50 more years, or almost 100, maybe more than 100 years. People still wanting to believe there's Martians. So, it continued. I don't know how many books got written, how many millions of dollars were wasted by people buying those books, and the so-called face on Mars. So if you really want to know the odds that this really was a face, what you'd have to do is do a proper Bayesian statistical calculation. You'd have to ask, well, how many photos were returned by the Mariner mission? How many mountains were on all those photos? How many of those photos did the scientists look through before they decided on a few that they would send to the media? And what are the odds that they picked one or two that thought, gee, this is kind of interesting, kind of looks like a face. Hey, they'll have fun with this. Let's put this one out. Not that they deliberately tried to create the whole Martian nonsense. I don't think they did. I think that scientists too often are used to dealing with other scientists, and they just think that, well, of course people know that's not a real carving. It's just a mountain that looks a bit like a face. But no, we got turned into, this is a whole big thing, and flim-flam artists, wrote books that you could find in the New Age bookstores, and it was all phony because, look, there's the actual face on Mars with better cameras taken by later missions. The Martian orbiter, for example. Okay, doesn't look anything like a face. And so, clear thinking, it's also how to get a job. Since the Great Recession of 2008, the older workers actually got rehired more easily than did the younger workers. Is that a reflection on our education? Well, here's a disturbing study. This is IQ scores, or rather measures of intelligence, but put in the form of IQ scores for people born. And IQ scores were actually going up for people born between 1960 and even probably before. Actually, I don't know. I shouldn't say. I don't know. 1960 to 1975. And then after 1975, environmental effects changed. And since then, IQ scores have been dropping. So I don't know when you guys were born, but this is not a good trend for the future. If anybody remembers the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, remember the scene in the restaurant? I weep for the future. Okay, so maybe that's not funny in this context, but dropping IQ scores. So they studied and they decided it was some kind of environmental effect. Environmental shouldn't necessarily mean some kind of toxin in the environment or hormone effects from plastics and so forth. It might just be our educational changes in education, changes in media exposure, worsening nutrition or health, social spillovers from immigration. They didn't know, okay? They just listed a few hypotheses and said, somebody else can go work on that. I don't know if anybody knows, but there it is. So this is a recent study, 2018. I don't know if anybody's followed up on it. I did not see any follow-ups. But that's a disturbing trend. Okay, sometimes people ask me, about, you know, Rick, I don't know what to do with my life. I don't know what to do with my life's work. I don't know what I want. I don't know what to major in. Cabrillo is asking me these things. They want me to declare a major. And here's what I tell them. I say, I think the most important thing you can answer is find a life work that surrounds you with quality people, people who can inspire you, people you can learn from, people who in some ways are better than you so that you can learn from them. Follow your personality, of course, also. I mean, you'll obviously have things you like and don't like. Things that people have a very powerful feeling what they like and don't like usually don't have to ask this question. They already know very much what they want to do. But if you have no idea and you could go into anything, I would say think about the quality of the people you're going to rub elbows with. Okay? So, I don't know, I would say science. How about science? Science is fun. I don't know. That's just me. Forget the earbuds, the video games, the chattering distractions the commercial interests want to hook you on while they take your dollars and leave you endlessly unfulfilled. You can click on the link. Science Daily. That's right where they want you. So you'll be primed to buy the next big thing in a vain hope, new hope, of finally being fulfilled. Higher Facebook use correlated with lower emotional and physical health. Yikes. Yikes. I can't help wondering if this kind of research is related to other studies showing that poor mental skills when teenagers, in other words, who exhibit poor mental skills is predictive of later development of Alzheimer's. Now, that may be genetic in some cases, but it's definitely cultural in a lot of cases. The great American mind's in decline as we descend into a new dark ages. American students are fully 4 grade levels behind their Chinese counterparts in the language of nature, mathematics. Happiness, primal level, comes from an intimate awareness and connection with what's real. We're designed to operate best in reality, not in a made-up world that we're constantly anxious will get exposed. Because ultimately we know in the privacy of our own minds when we're fooling ourselves, and it's an unhappy place. We relax and we return to health by simple, focused awareness. Zen masters realized this centuries ago, and modern psychology agrees. I'll let you click on that and read that. That's me enjoying some happiness all by my lonesome on a 17-mile round-trip run to Caliente Peak in the Carrizo Plain National Monument. I love going to that place. So this is the last slide, I think. The universe revealed by science, it is magical. Astrology and other pseudosciences, really, they're not magical. It's time to let go. It's the 21st century. Let's evolve. You want to go slack-jawed with awe, ponder quantum mechanics, modern cosmology, the multiverse. Take Astro 4. We'll talk about the multiverse. Science is much more magical because it's nature herself talking to us. It's not make-believe. When you see a great inspiring film, aren't you more inspired when you learn that it's actually a true story? And then the best reason is science is just plain fun. So toss dogmatism, learn to be humble, don't dictate to nature what she is and is not. Enjoy the mysteries and resume the responsibility of independent thought. Get comfortable with a certain amount of uncertainty, give respect to the weight of evidence. Be open-minded, but don't be so open-minded that your brain falls out. All right, well, we made it. We're a little teeny bit late, but actually I think legally I'm able to keep you till 9:10. That is not my plan to keep you till 9:10, but I did keep you to 9:10 today. Thanks for listening. I'll go ahead and pause the recording. This recording will be available to those of you who had to check out early or to those of you who didn't hear it. Do we have any last questions from anybody?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Where